Let's see. So could each panelist please give us a brief synopsis of their first impressions about and experiences with surf therapy and their journey to now researching and understanding it?
Great, thank you. So I first started off with the June Miller Memorial Foundation, and I was working with Carly Rogers. And the first summer I participated, I had no idea. I knew what surfing brought, but I wasn't really sure what, you know, a group of kids could get out of it. And so I volunteered as a surf instructor for the first summer, and really just, you know, through seeing smiles on faces, we still didn't really know. And so we started off researching in a very kind of naturalistic way by having kids draw pictures of their experience of the day from surf therapy. And from that, we began to see certain descriptions that they would write in, you know, certain words that had to do with hope. There was one in particular, a girl in foster care who talked about how she had an eating disorder and how when she was up there on the wave, the girl with the eating disorder disappeared, and she didn't know who she was at the moment, but she was free from that eating disorder for that moment. And so it kind of like expressed hope for the future. And that kind of led us into looking at different scales eventually as we saw other pictures that that indicated that. And then from there, we ended up using a quantitative hope measure.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone want to go next? Kristin, Geophil?
Okay, well, I'll go next. So my experience with surf therapy really began with the Waves of Wellness program and Joel Pilgrim here in Sydney, in Australia. I had the opportunity of being working with Joel at the Community Mental Health Centre when he was a occupational therapist there working in our public health system, and took his first client out to a surf therapy session where, you know, he just was astonished at how much he was able to achieve with this young man who was living with a bipolar disorder, and you know, in that environment, in out the back, and you know, he just saw the value of surf therapy in this sort of N=1 case study. And you know, from that, you know, Waves of Wellness was a not-for-profit that was founded a few years ago and has now grown like Topsy, and is running programs all along the eastern seaboard of Australia. And I think in the next 12 months, we should be opening up in Western Australia on the Indian Ocean side of the continent as well. So it's been you know, really just a great privilege for me to, you know, be involved in this endeavor and to see the research that's flowed from that. And I guess, you know, my overarching sort of message is the importance of the individual stories, as Gregor was saying from his experience with in California. But I think, you know, it's this combination of the qualitative experience of the participants combined with the actual quantitative findings that are really so important in terms of demonstrating the efficacy of surf therapy and being able to convince governments and funders that this is something that needs to be incorporated into all mental health and mental wellness programs right around the world.
Great, thank you so much. I think you're totally right. It's so much more powerful when we can see the numbers, but also the stories as well. So how about Kristen, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. So I actually came to surf therapy as an outsider, if you will. I grew up in the Midwest in the US, and even though there is a big lake there, I didn't surf it. So when I came out to San Diego, I was working for the Department of Veterans Affairs and had just started a new job. didn't have much work the second week of work, and my colleagues had known I had some interest in sports and exercise, and so they asked me, why don't you just volunteer for the National Veteran Summer Sports Clinic? So I found the clinic closest to my home, which was thankfully it was a surf therapy venue. And I showed up and I said, hi, I'm the new psychologist in town. Do you need any help with the program? And just to reduce any fears, I was not teaching surf therapy at that point, but they had me serve as a water volunteer. And so during that week, it was pretty remarkable to me because you could see positive changes in people. You could see the improvements in mood. You could see the confidence it was building. And so as I just observed all week while helping people on and off surfboards, in and out of wheelchairs, etc., do in therapy. And so I saw that people were approaching things that were fearful to them and learning mastery over that. I learned that they were enjoying and getting, like behavioral activation. They were actively involved in something that was meaningful to them. And so being the nerd that I am, I went home and said, okay, what is the research on surf therapy? And in 2013, there wasn't a whole lot. And so I just kind of filed that idea in my back pocket. And then when I switched over to working for the Department of Defense, and grant writing was a huge part of my job, I ended up writing a grant to look at the psychological effects of surf therapy. And one of my colleagues mentioned to me that my colleague, Betty Mikhailovich-Krog, had an existing program that existed long before my team joined her program. And this was provided as surf therapy was provided as standard care in our military hospital. And so she and I formed a partnership, and we've been doing surf therapy research ever since.
Thank you so much.
Okay, hello to everyone. Yeah, my story with surf therapy is kind of different. I've been a surfer my whole life. I'm from Puerto Rico, so we are an island and surfing is super accessible. I have a brother with Down syndrome. So when I was adolescent, I used to take him to the beach, and I started seeing that he was just doing better in his condition. But it was not until I was on my second year of master's. I had a job as a researcher in the medical science campus of the University of Puerto Rico, and they gave me the authorization to start developing programs or research related to other alternative methods of intervention. So I took the task of taking kids with autism surfing twice a week and monitor that for a whole year. And the results were evident. Just the quality of life in general of the kids and families were just doing much better in language, in motor skills, in sensory integration, and just getting back to the community, being able to participate in therapies like language therapies and occupational therapies that they were not prepared before. So for me, surf therapy gave me a tool as a clinical psychologist where I can work in other scenarios and work with the system. And in Puerto Rico, we call the system the whole family or the support group that a kid with developmental delays or neurotypical aspects have. So that was my history. So it came from my passion of surfing, my experience with my brother, and later on as a clinician, how I needed to develop something else so I can provide families with better tools to work with their kids and their development and quality of life.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. I think, it's really important to hear all of your stories, and you come from all different backgrounds, and each of you have made such huge contributions in terms of advancing surf therapy for all of us. And everyone here is either already involved, runs their own program, or is trying to get involved and trying to help advance. So it's really awesome to hear from all of you. I just want to remind everyone, feel free to ask questions. You can unmute yourself and ask anything. And if not, I can move on to the next one from the Whova app. I'll just give everyone a minute. Any questions? Okay, for now, we'll go to the next one on the Whova app, and this is from Matt Matilla. So he says, we're seeing more peer-reviewed surf therapy research, thanks. How do we get it out beyond our choir of advocates and academics? Where are the existing gaps, and what of the existing research is especially compelling from your perspective? And I'll put that in the chat too, in case you want to read it, but anyone who wants to start, go ahead.
Well, I might have a start, and look, I think it's it's true that the special issue of the Global Journal of Community Psychology and Practice was on surf therapy was a fantastic initiative that was led by Gregor and has really brought together a whole bunch of research. But I think it's important for us to also get the message out into more conventional outlets in the therapeutic space as well. So some of the work that Jamie Marshall has been doing, he did a qualitative research study with the Waves of Wellness program in Newcastle, just north of Sydney, and he has got the preliminary results from that. And I'm really going to be encouraging Jamie to think about publishing this in a clinical psychiatric journal, because I think that's an audience that we're not necessarily going to reach unless we actually speak to them in their own setting, so to speak. So I think I'll be suggesting to Jamie that maybe the Australian New Zealand Journal of Psychiatry, which is sort of our local clinical psychiatry journal that is published by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, would be here in Australia and New Zealand, would be a good outlet for this. And that will, because that actually goes to every psychiatrist who's working in clinical practice in Australia and New Zealand, as well, of course, as being accessible to people around the world. I think I'll also be encouraging Jamie to look at publishing as open access, because I think that's another key thing and that was one of the great things about the Global Journal of Community Psychology and Practice, is that was an open access, so you didn't have to pay to subscribe to the journal in order to be able to read it. So even though many of the more traditional academic journals are not freely open access, you can pay a fee and make it open access so that everyone in the field can get access to the information without having to be affiliated with the university or buy an expensive journal subscription.
I think I kind of see the Global Journal as the jumping off point, not an end point. Kind of like one of the first steps on the ladder of building an evidence base. And I think, like Phil's saying, in addition to like clinical psychology journals, also occupational therapy and physical therapy journals, where we can expand the reach to different types of practitioners that would be interested in surf therapy. And I think in terms of like the most compelling evidence to me is that there seem to be benefits across a multitude of populations. And there aren't a lot of interventions that really expand across populations. A lot of the interventions we see are focused on one particular population. And so I think that's really optimistic, in my opinion.
I agree. And Phil, I'd like to thank you for that thought, because you shared it in our webinar last month. And it was interesting because we had just finished our surf hike randomized control trial, and we were talking about, which journal we want to go to so we can start formatting in that way. And we were initially thinking, more of a sports psych journal, which was our path for our first study. But we're actually, it was done as a randomized clinical trial. We have diagnostic assessments as well as self-report, as well as Fitbit data. And so we actually decided to move more towards the clinical psychology, psychiatric realm based on your recommendations. So I thank you for that. The other thing I will say is that, popular media, for better or for worse, definitely brings attention to it. I know that when we've had features, although the science isn't exactly precise, it does raise awareness and gets the message out there for people who may not even know surf therapy exists. So the best we can partner and get our work in other outlets, because, you know, I love journal writing, you know, it's one of my favorite work tasks to do. But not a lot of people like reading it, which I don't blame them, and it's not always accessible. And so if we can find other platforms and other ways to get our research findings out in a more accessible way, I think that can be another way of getting our messages out there.
I definitely feel the same way, Kristen. It also depends where you are in the world. For example, in Puerto Rico, which is a small island, I have more access to news channels, to radio, to surf magazines. And these outlets have been incredible for us, because that's the reality. Not a lot of people will read a peer review journal or magazine or even understand it. But people in general could be at their home and put a TV channel and start seeing, in my case, will be a report of Surf for Them, and maybe they will choose a case study and interview parents and the kid. And that will give a lot of value of the work that we're doing to the population in general. So my recommendation is to get out there and to try to find a space in the news. That would be the best one. I think that's super accessible for everybody. And another thing will be other magazines that people like to read. It could be in sports, in surf, or something else. It doesn't have to be everything peer review. In relation to the gaps that we might have, well, we're starting to do research, and so we are in that first stage of getting all the IRB approved studies worldwide, and we need to do more control groups and randomized trials and to get better. So we are super excited on where we are right now, but we have a lot of work forward in order to prove that surfing is a standardized form of practice.
Amazing, thank you. We got a good question in the chat, and it says, Kristen, are you allowed to shortly say something about the results of your RCT comparing surf and hike therapy? I'm very curious about that. I think we're all very curious.
Well, thank you for that question. And thank you for also asking me if I'm allowed to say anything, because being in the Department of Defense, everything needs to be approved. I can tell you that we just officially, long story short, we had exceeded our recruitment. And so we initially only needed 86 folks. We requested up to 125. We had 110 when COVID hit, and the programs haven't been running since. So after some debate, decided to wrap up the study at 110 since it was sufficiently powered. And so we are currently in the last phases of data entry and data cleaning. We expect to start analyzing the data after the new year. And so my hope is that we'll have results and a manuscript submitted sometime in 2021, but we have not looked at the data. We've not unblinded the data yet. So I don't have anything to report at this point, but we're very excited about it too. And we'll happily share when I do have those findings.
Awesome, thanks. For those of you that don't know, Kristen's study, the randomized control trial, is really the next big step for us in terms of advancing, the level of our research. So we're really excited to see how that goes. But we got a lot of questions coming in. Let's see. One we have says, are there any modalities that are proven to be most effective combined with surf therapy, so that the control is that the other modality is great, for example, with, I think, PTSD, but then when that is combined with surf therapy, the results are more effective? Is that, anyone want to tackle that one? It's also in the chat if you want to read it.
Sure, that is a fabulous question, and we actually have we don't have a mechanism to submit it to, but we actually have a proposal written. So one line of my research is surf therapy and activity-based interventions. The other is evidence-based treatments for PTSD using psychotherapy. And so we actually have a grant written that combines both. So people would get psychotherapy plus surf therapy compared to psychotherapy alone, so that we can test to see, does it enhance the effects of a standard treatment? And so we don't have that underway. We've only have that written and ready to go if a funding mechanism opens up for that. But that is really an important question we need to understand, because, you know, surf therapy may be a standalone intervention for some, but for others, it may be a great augment to other existing based treatments. And I think it's a really important area of research that we need to explore.
I haven't explored it research-wise, but it's evident that every single patient that I have that is receiving surf therapy and other modalities of therapies is improving. It's just doing better. In some aspects, they were not ready to start a speech therapy or something like that, and we have been able to develop those areas and get him prepared for that. In other areas, it has been vice versa. He's been in surf therapy. Once we included occupational therapy, sensory integration, and other things, the kid just did better. So I think this is a great combination for now. I don't focus in one therapy as a clinician. Surf therapy is a great tool. Psychotherapy is a great tool. What I found as a clinician is when I actually have a mixture of everything, my patients have better tools to deal in the day by day. So exponentially, I think it helps both ways.
All right, the next question in the chat, we're getting a couple of votes for Jamie's question. And he asks, a high proportion of studies focused on surf therapy are relying on self-report data collection, especially in terms of mental health and well-being, understandably for pragmatic reasons. Is there scope for more exploration of biomarkers such as cortisol, HRV, or others in terms of surf therapy research?
I think that's a great question, Jamie. You know, I think there is great scope to adding those biomarkers. Where here in Australia, we're planning to do a study which we would have started this year, but thanks to COVID, we've had to delay it until early next year. It'll be in collaboration with the Thompson Institute at the University of the Sunshine Coast, where my friend and colleague Jim Logopoulos has an MRI scanner. And we're going to be looking at doing some MRI scans pre and post a surf therapy program targeting first responders living in the community with PTSD in that particular community. So that will give us some handle on what are the brain changes that go along with the improvements in well-being and reductions in symptoms that we know people experience when they're participating in a surf therapy program. But I think it'll give us, it'll be really exciting to see what happens in the brain of someone who's living with PTSD when they actually experience what are the sort of physical correlates of that mental well-being change. That's only one example, but I think that it's a great opportunity to build the evidence base and to get a better understanding of what are the underlying mechanisms beneath these benefits.
And I can't necessarily, so I think the biomarker and more physiological measures definitely a very important area for research. I will say that, one of the limitations of our first phase of surf therapy research was that it was all self-report. And we know there's inherent limitations with that. On some level, it's really important that we change how people feel, but we know that self-report may or may not be an accurate indication of that. In our surf hike randomized control trial. We had our normal self-reports that we included in our first phase, but we also had diagnostic administered measures. So a trained assessor actually assessed clinical symptoms. So we have those data as well. And then we do have some physio data in that all participants were given a Fitbit device. And so we can get sleep off of that. We can get activity and other physiological measures in terms of calories and stuff as well. So we can take a look at that and look at all of those data to see how well they match up and what new information they tell us.
Awesome, thank you. And I know from one of our earlier sessions that Waves for Change has started to measure heart rate variability, which I believe is a measure of stress. So I can share a link to that information. I think we are running out of time, but I'll just ask one more quick question. So do you have any advice for people involved in surf therapy programs that are new, but interested in getting involved in the research aspect? And I think I'll start out with Gregor because he is my mentor and he helped me get involved, and I'm sure all of you can share about this, but I know Gregor can.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, I think so. The special issue is a good place to start in terms of just looking at, all the research that was compiled until that was published, and then seeking out other studies. So focusing your efforts on understanding what's been researched on the population or populations that your program serves. Another avenue, which is being spearheaded by ISTO, is reorganizing the working groups by population served. And so previously it was researchers were in one group and practitioners and marketing was in another group. Now it's going to be organized by the populations. And so by doing that, researchers and practitioners will be engaged in a way that they weren't before. And I would say that's a really great avenue because advancements will be communicated much more quickly. Another kind of line, which is more informal, that I know that ISTO is interested in formalizing to a greater extent, is mentorship. So for example, in the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, I've mentored Chloe because she had an interest in research. And so it's not about, there's not a particular way to do this, but if you can find researchers that are interested in mentoring and they get involved with your program, they can help train people on your staff or yourself how to better understand how to conduct research. And of course, there's the great potential of having cross-program research studies through ISTO. And then finally, there's a growing list of tools that ISTO is developing and making accessible to programs, like the evaluation framework. And so through a combination of these, it's really easy and much more accessible than it's ever been to get involved with research. And I would also say that of all the researchers that I know in ISTO, they're all very much willing to help.
Yeah, great. Let's kick it over to Gio. I think he was about to hop in earlier.
I concur with Gregor. I think mentorship is a huge tool that we have. So ISTO is a global organization. If you go to the website, you'll see all the organizations that are contributors, what are their populations and where they stand. And you can look into organizations that are working with your population and if they have researchers or with whom they collaborated. And that would be the perfect channel to get in board right now. So if your organization is just starting, there's no perfect time where a researcher can jump in. I think at any point in your program, it's going to be super valuable. And that we are a group of researchers and that we know other people. And researchers need organizations and populations in order to do their research. So this is a win-win situation for everybody. And feel free also to contact academia, universities around you, because most researchers are looking for population. But my first, what I recommend is for you to hop into ISTO and become a contributor. And already we have researchers and programs that have done the job, and we can help to get you during the way and get ready for research.
And I'd just add that, geography is no barrier. I've really enjoyed being a co-supervisor for Jamie Marshall's PhD. The fact that that's been based out of Edinburgh Napier University has really had no impact in terms of, I don't see as much of him face to face as I do of my other doctoral students. But the work that he's been doing is groundbreaking, and it's been very easy for me to be involved. So you shouldn't see yourself as being limited to only working with researchers in your own geographical location. The whole world is out there.
Whoops, I was muted. Thank you guys. I think we have about 5 more minutes. So I think the next question, let's go with one from Tim Conabear. Is there a critical mass of evidence that we need to get surf therapy recognized? With ISTO growing, this seems like a great forum to help hit that threshold.
It's a good question, and I think it partly depends on what the what the goal is in terms of that recognition. And I think there's going to be recognition with practitioners in terms of demonstrating efficacy, that it really does work. It moves symptoms, it diminishes symptoms and improves well-being in a very well evaluated framework. On the other hand, funders are sometimes more interested in the cost effectiveness argument. So, I mean, one of the things that I think we'll have to add to our studies going forward is actually demonstrating that surf therapy is cost effective in comparison to other therapies. And I don't think there's any reason to think that it won't be, but actually providing the data to say, okay, you get equal benefits in terms of symptom reduction and improvements in functional outcomes and well-being by doing surf therapy as you do through some other established and government supported initiatives will be really important. So I think adding that cost effectiveness data, and health economists are out there that have been conducting the studies that enable us to evaluate the cost effectiveness of other existing and well established therapies. I think adding that data into the surf therapy equation in terms of research will be an important thing.
I fully agree. And it's, if we want surf therapy to be recognized as an intervention, we just need to understand, does it produce changes in medical outcomes? If we're thinking in terms of medical reimbursement or insurance reimbursement, we'll need to do that for each condition that we think surf therapy is helpful for. We need to understand what benefit is it alone versus as an augment. We need to understand what is a minimal dose. So if we're giving someone a prescription for it, or we're talking to somebody about you can expect benefits in X number of sessions, I think understanding dosing is also really important. So these are things that often medical research focuses on. And I think that if we want to go that route, we'll need to do comparable research to have those data in order to provide.
And I think ISTO provides a great structure for all of this to happen, because through organizing working groups by population, this is going to provide a lot more opportunity for programs wherever they're at in their research capacity to increase that capacity in a very short amount of time. 5 years ago, programs didn't even know who was working with what population, or that even other programs existed. And so we've really catapulted a long way. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for all of this to happen through ISTO.
I want to answer this from another standpoint also. Sometimes it's hard for organizations to get people involved. So what Serve for Them used to do, because with the pandemic we are not being able, we do 2 open houses during the year. One is focused for new families and kids, other is focused for clinicians. Once you get people at the beach and they see what's really happening, when they talk to parents and they see the kid and they start seeing changes, now they see the value of CERT therapy. So more than also the research is the aspect of how we get people to the beach. So people can see the work that we're doing and the results they're having. And when I'm able to do that, everybody gets on board, helps, gives a donation. There's no family that goes into Serve for Them and leaves. Every single family stays in the program as long as they can. So getting people to the beach will be something really good. And well, now with the structure that we have of ISTO, we can do it globally.
Thank you guys so much. I wish we had more time to get to all the questions, but hopefully the 4 of them can answer some more in the Whova app. But thank you so much. You guys are all legends. I really appreciate it. Keep doing awesome work. I think Chris is gonna close us out.
Oh my goodness. All that magic in one room. I think one of my questions was, how do we duplicate a Kristen, a Phil, a Giovanni, and Gregor? Because the bottom line is, yeah, the 4 of you have led the way and have been role models in how to share and give of your time. But there are only so many hours in the day. And Phil Ward joined us at 3:45 a.m. To be here today. So with only a few hours in the day, if we could just duplicate you 4, yeah, I think the surf therapy sector research would go like that. I can't say thank you enough. What an informative fireside chat. And yes, I'm going to ask a favor when Kristin, Gio, and Gregor and Phil get an opportunity. The questions we didn't get to will be in the Whova app under this session. And if the 4 of you could quickly spend more of your gracious time and answer those online so that we've got them in writing. I just want to say very quickly, we've only got 30 minutes and I want everybody to get a break. We are wrapping this up. We've got 3 more sessions. If you don't know Tom Hewitt from Surfers Not Street Children, you will love him. And then we have our all Spanish speaking panel. Giovanni is moderating that. And yes, by the grace of God, the transcriber has just come through in the last 10 minutes, which is why Chloe, by the way, Chloe, you rock star. Chloe managed that entire session. So thank you so much. So we do have an English transcriber for some of us non-Spanish speaking attendees. And then, gosh, we are gonna keynote with Eski Britton and Martina from Sea Sisters. So I hope everybody can join the last 3 sessions of this 2-day massive wave that we're all riding. Thanks for all the love about joining ISTO. Yes, we are about sharing, collaborating, research, and advocating for the benefits of surf therapy. And we want to do it together because we know we're stronger. Thanks again, Kristen, Phil, Gio, Gregor. You're the best. See you guys in 30. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.